Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Only a Bag, a travel podcast. I'm Darcy, and with me is...
Nathaniel. Thank you, everyone, so much for tuning in to another episode.
Yeah, of our little mini-series of house-sitting episodes. Nathaniel, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about getting your first house sit. It was a question that a lot of people asked on Medium, the article posting, writing website, sharing website. A lot of people, when I posted some of these articles on house sitting, a number of people commented asking, do you have any advice for getting your first house sit? And I think they were just being polite and trying to interact, but I answered them nevertheless, and I gave them as much information as possible, which is probably a little too much, to be honest. I probably could have just given them one or two small bits of information, but I figured this would be a good episode.
Yeah.
Well, I think the last episode we talked briefly at the very end about sort of local, basically, trying to find someone local.
Yeah, absolutely. In your hometown or wherever you live, if you have the opportunity to find sort of, not beginner house sits, but just to get your bearings in a place that's comfortable.
Yeah, I think because I'm 27 now, I think.
Yes, you are.
Sorry, I always forget. And I think I started when I was like 18 or 19, I started house sitting, but mostly like sort of not on accident, but it was sort of, it's like a family friend would ask my mom, like, do you know anybody who could like just take care of my cats while I'm out of town for the week? And my name came up. And so it sort of slowly led into this, like for a very brief year or two, I had a number of people who would pass my name around if they were going out of town, or if they worked somewhere else, if they were like, we were from Savannah, but if they worked in Charleston or somewhere else a few hours away, I would go and I would take care of their animals. And about half of these were overnight jobs. So it was sort of pet sitting, and then it was pet sitting overnight. And I think it was a little bit later, because this is back in like 2014, 2015. And it really wasn't until like 2018 that somebody sort of was like, have you considered house sitting? And we thought, well, what is house sitting?
Yeah. And then we did it. And it's been great.
So getting, like Darcy mentioned, getting started by looking locally, putting out the word. Like, I know we have like, I don't know if anybody's on Facebook. Darcy, you think you're still on Facebook?
I am.
But I think that gets posted often. There's like, for our city, there's a couple different...
Oh, yeah, it's
like,
huge now. Yeah, there are actually... If you're from Savannah, this is specific advice, there are so many house and pet sitters in Savannah, and it's just kind of going crazy there. But if you live in a place where the market's oversaturated by other people doing the same thing, go to if you have a car, go to a little town outside. Just kind of look a little outside of your area. There might be people there looking for pet and house sitters, but people in the U.S. almost always need a house or pet sitter. There's always opportunities, so I'm sure you can find something if that's what you're looking for.
For sure. It's also like one thought is when I'm in Savannah, I always charge money for pet sitting because I am going out of my way, to go. When I was there, I had a job, so I have to like figure out how to get to work from this new location. I'd have to figure out new travel times. It'd be this whole like, if they were like, please don't use my groceries, I'd have to get all my own groceries over there. And I only had a bike at the time, so this is much more complicated, I realize, than driving. It's not that hard, I guess, when you're driving. But basically, it was one of those things where it was just more difficult for me to house sit where I lived in Savannah. So I always charged a little bit for it. But if you're interested in just getting some experience, getting started, offering, to do it for free or offering to do it for friends, just like to help out, is a really good start. And then slowly expanding into people that you don't know. Again, I think we mentioned in the last episode, just, you getting reviews. And of course, you don't get reviews from people you do locally unless you do, find them through one of these websites, which I think Trusted House Sitters and House Sitting US or House Sitting America or something like that are both, obviously they have a lot of house sits in America, and you might be able to find one in your city, in your town, especially because in Europe, we've noticed a lot of the house sits don't require a car. And in America, a lot of them do require a car, which can be really difficult if you aren't from America, or like us, we don't live there anymore. So if we try to house sit in America, it has to be in a place that is either centrally located or has public transportation. But yeah, no, so finding one locally is, I think, the best way to get started, like right off the bat, just putting out the word in your sort of connection of friends, Facebook groups. Savannah has like 30 Facebook groups, all for different things, but different neighborhoods have their own Facebook groups. And, you know, kind of getting in on those is a really good start as well. And if you're in the town or you're still living in the town that your family's from, you know, putting out the word to them and all of their friends.
Yeah, just spread the word that it's something that you're doing and, you know, try to get experience. And on that note, you know, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably think of us as people in Italy, and we're talking about house sitting in the U.S. And all of this information is going to be, I don't want to say universal. I haven't, you know, house sit outside of Earth, but it's international information. You know, we've done house sits in Scotland and France and Italy. And Italy it's a lot harder to find house sits here. They just aren't typical. We've had Italians very point blank tell us, you know, Italians don't do that, you know. And in fact, our house sit here in Italy was through an American homeowner. So all of this information is, you know, can be applied to house sits anywhere.
Absolutely. No, we've been told Italians are very untrustworthy of people in their home when they're not in their home. So yeah, although it's an Italian podcast, you might not be able to find very many Italian-hosted house sits, but absolutely expat-hosted house sits. But if you're interested in places like France house sitting is huge. Australia is another one. It's common for like on posts for Australian house sits for like, you know, there's places to park your caravan. My dog is good with kids and other dogs. It's like almost like it seems expected that you are going to be bringing your whole family and your pets and your movable house, rather than, you know, on your vacation, you know, rather than just flying there and staying in their house and taking care of it. And it kind of like that actually kind of flows, I think, next really well to our next point is to sort of read these guidelines clearly, read these requirements clearly.
Yes, there's so many reasons to read the requirements clearly, but thinking about how international house sitting is, visas are something that I think is really important to think about. In Australia, you're going to need a specific visa, yeah? And Italy, if you're an American, France, if you're an American, you can just come in for 3 months and your visa is given to you at the airport. It's a little stamp.
However, if I may interject,
yeah,
for both the Schengen zone, which is basically most of Europe is in the Schengen zone, as well as if you're going to the United Kingdom, which is a separate visa zone. And just, I guess I should also double clarify, we'll have an episode on visas at some point, but the Schengen zone and the EU are not the same thing. Some countries are in the Schengen zone, but not the EU, and vice versa. It's kind of confusing. But this is all to say, be a little bit like circumspect with what you're doing, because anytime we come into Italy, especially through Germany, we always get a lot of questions. What are you doing here? Why do you only have a one-way ticket? How long are you going to be here? Are you working while you're here? How do you make money? How much money do you have? And on that note, when we went to Scotland for a house sit, you know, you can, again, same here, you get your visa at the border in the form of a stamp in your passport. And this lovely security guard at the border was wondering what we were doing. And we said, we're house sitting. He's like, well, are you getting money for that? And we're like, of course not, sir. We can't make money in your country as Americans. And to be fair, we weren't making money. I mean, there's no money exchanging hands at all. It's just we were trying to make it as clear as possible that we knew we were not allowed to make money. And, you know, he was just kind of like, what are you doing? How long are you staying? Why don't you have a ticket out? And we explained, like, we're not sure. You know, it ends on one day, but they've asked to, you know, we could stay a few extra days if we'd like. So we're going to look at tickets later. And then he asked where they're going. And we were like, I think they're going somewhere in the Middle East. And that's when he took our passports and went to the back room for about 15 minutes. And so that was...
we got quite lucky, though. Not with him. He was a pain. But it was our first international house sit. I mean, I know I'd done some house sitting, but it was all for family and friends, or friends of friends. And so I was trusting of them. And with the woman that we house sat through in Scotland, we knew her first name and she seemed wonderful. And to be fair, she is. But we went in.
We didn't have a picture either.
No, we didn't have a picture of her. We didn't know her last name. We knew their.
I don't think we had her phone number either. It was
No, I don't think we did. I think
because
we
we
only
were trying to find her WhatsApp number, but we
Yeah.
couldn't. We were only committing through communicating through the website.
Yeah. And I think we had the address of the
Yes.
house we were going to.
Yes.
But to be fair, we looked fairly suspicious given the information that we lacked.
Yeah.
So we got lucky. So for you all, make sure you get your house sitters or house owners' first and last name and their phone number.
Yeah, and maybe any other information you can get because it's it helps not having suspicious border guards, especially for Europe. I can't speak to Australia. I can't speak to other. I should also add just, but there are more than just America, Europe, and Australia. House sitting is international, but very much in other countries that aren't Europe, Australia, and US, it's almost always expats. It's very rarely going to be natives because it's just, even Italy, it's the whole point. It's like, why would you get a stranger when you could just ask your cousin or your uncle or your niece or your nephew? And I think I made fun of this on the article version of this podcast, but Italians have a terrible habit of just leaving their dogs at home when they go on vacation and coming back to dead dogs because there's a thing here where some people just don't really seem to care about their pets. So I sort of alluded to the fact that some Italians do not care as much as other people might. And that's not to say all Italians. It's, very much a specific group of I guess, I don't know, people who didn't want the dog they have. I have honestly no idea. Which I should also add that, Italy is one of these countries that does have a lot of wild, or not wild, feral, I guess they're called, feral dogs and cats.
Yeah, I would guess you could call them that.
So it's not like people don't kick their dogs out of their house. All this is basically to say that different countries do have different ways of viewing pets. If you are from America, you might be like us, where we're like, everybody loves pets. And then you go somewhere else, you're like, oh, some people love pets.
Yeah. That's a big thing to consider about where you're going to be house sitting and what kind of house sit you're going to have because, taking care of a cat in an apartment is very different from taking care of what might be a small to large farm, or anything like that. Just read. People on the websites that we use tend to be quite specific. I get quite wary if they are not specific. And it's just, sometimes, there are quite a few in Spain, and they're quite rural. And sometimes, a car will be provided, but it still means that you're maybe taking care of 3 horses and like 30 chickens on a mountain somewhere by yourself. Again, quite different from taking care of a cat in an apartment in a big city. So
absolutely. And because we have a lot to talk about the requirements, before we do, we're going to have a very short ad break, if that's okay with everybody. And then we'll be back, hopefully, just right afterwards.
Hey, we made it back from the ad. We hope you did too. I was talking about requirements and different kinds of house sits, and also something to consider, thinking about taking care of horses or farm animals versus, house pets is if you have experience with animals like that. We have not done any house sits with horses or farm animals because chickens. Okay, yes, chickens. We did have chickens and they were amazing. But I had some experience with chickens. I have minuscule experience with a very tiny, energetic goat. Not nearly enough to do a house sit with one. And I love horses and cows, but I don't feel confident being their sole protector or provider. So, be clear with yourself about what you're up for and what you have experience doing. And also put that, we were talking about your bio on your profile, put that information in your bio. Say what kind of animals you have had experience with. And trusted sitters. What am I trying to say? Trusted house sitters? There we go. Trusted house sitters, in fact, has a little sort of like, I don't know.
It's like a widget thing in the corner, like mark the ones you have experience with.
Exactly.
And that includes too, like things like fishes or gerbils or hamsters or birds that are not chickens, but like sort of parrots, I guess. anything, I guess, anything you've had experience with. And I again, as Darcy mentioned, like, be super honest too. Like, if you feel comfortable, like, actually taking care and recognizing when a bird is, in pain, for instance, or physically in discomfort, rather than just having a day or doing something normal. Because I think a lot of people, when you live with a dog or a cat, you get used to signs of like, oh, that doesn't look proper. But if it's an animal you're not really comfortable with or you don't have experience with, it can be a little bit confusing. And some of these websites will talk about like trusted house sitters. There is an option to have access to a vet. But every house that we've been to, obviously, the homeowner leaves us with information of the nearest vet and how to contact them and, what to expect. But there are more requirements too, like not just obviously like what you're comfortable with, but when you're reading, like if you're doing this online and you're reading their description of what they want or what they're expecting or what they require out of their house sitter, one of those small, tiny ones is a car. And that's like just a super something that like we didn't actually notice, like Nomodor and I think Trusted House Sitters. Those are also these little like not widgets, but these little like buttons or something. It's just like sitters require a car, sitters blah blah blah, or sitters will be provided a car. And sometimes it's kind of small, and we didn't realize until applying for these sits that like, oh, I did not realize this is going to be like 35 kilometers from the nearest town.
We do always check on the map to see where
these
places are. I mean, they don't provide their specific address, but they will give you a very specific area or town or nearest town.
Especially when they say something like they're in like Champs-Élysées, France, and then we're like, well, where's Champs-Élysées? I'm making up a word. This is not a real place. Obviously, just to clarify, this is my fake French place. But then you look on the map, and it's this like tiny 6 houses, and they're like, we're 6 kilometers from the village of Champs-Élysées, and you realize like, oh, you guys are real out there. And that is something to really just pay attention, because obviously, if you like being out, peace, quiet, and you're into that, it's an amazing opportunity. If you get terrified at the idea of having no one remotely close by to you, possibly there are other house sits that are better suited for you. I don't think we've actually really done any rural house sits. They're sort of
no.
We don't have a car, and that's the thing. It's like if you're renting a car, some of these house sits that are rural are actually like in amazing locations to visit places, and then get back to your house and have a really quiet, peaceful evening. But I think some of them will provide their car. If you do drive manual or standard, you're going to be in a lot better shape. If you do not drive a manual car, if you only drive automatic, not as good shape. Almost all the house sets that provide cars only provide manual cars, which is to be expected. But I don't think it's an amazing opportunity to drive on a manual car if you've never driven before in a manual car.
Do not do that at a house sit.
Yeah, I think that's a good piece of advice to follow.
We're just trying to give people the opportunity, like, oh, maybe you wouldn't want to do that.
Maybe you want to practice in somebody else's car.
Definitely know how to do the things you're signing up to do.
100%. And so after that, so some of the other, not requirements, but I guess things to pay attention to are, one is money.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think we've found some house sits that ask you to pay their utilities.
Ah, yes. Yeah, that stinks. Especially in Europe right now, and probably Europe in general, if you're listening to this as an American, utilities are expensive.
Yeah.
So bear that in mind if the homeowner is requiring you to pay utilities.
It's not common, I will say. We've never done it. It's rare to see it. The only time we've ever seen it are on the very rare house sits. I think we mentioned at the first episode, house sits that have no pets. But in the very, very rare house sits that have no pets, they will ask you to pay utilities. And sometimes it'll just be like, can you just pay for your heating? It is in the middle of the winter. Part of this too, I think, is they assume there is still a bit of an idea that Americans don't know how to use utilities properly. Like they sort of keep their house, they're at 70 degrees when it's 15 degrees outside, and it's sort of like, could you keep it at 50? Especially now, as you mentioned, there's basically, I think in Italy specifically, its utilities are 3 or 4 times higher than they were last year, specifically gas. So people who were paying 300 a month last year for heating are now paying closer to 9 or 1,200 euros. And so this is obviously becoming unmanageable. And so if you are house sitting, it's especially if you're listening to this in 2022, you might start seeing homeowners ask for utilities or to be, recompensated for the utilities. And one of the last things is kind of going back to this. We talked about vets. We talked about pets and what you have experience, what kind of pets you have experience with, and what you don't. But there are I think one of the biggest things to pay attention to is what you need to do for each pet.
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of pets are quite average and easy to take care of, but most people will be very specific if their pet requires any extra medical care, like from a single pill in the morning to, shots because it's diabetic or, different things like that. So read carefully to see what their pet's needs are and if that's something that you can do for them.
I think the only time we've had to do something weird is we did have to give, I think one cat, we have to give a pill, which was always, I think it was a pill, maybe it was like ointment or something. We had to brush a dog's teeth. We had to give another dog.
That poor little pupper, he needed a lot. Well, not a lot. He
yeah.
was fine, and I love him so much. But he needed a couple pills.
Yeah.
We had to brush his teeth sometimes. Not that often. They were like, every so often keep his teeth clean.
Yeah, there's sometimes, and that's like the normal things, I think, or not normal, but that's like they expect everyone to do it because it's not that difficult.
But they also were clear with us and asked if that was something that we could do.
Sure. Yeah. And I think on that same note, I talked about house sitting on Medium on one of these articles, and somebody commented like, "Oh, seems really cool, but I don't think it's right for me. I don't like being around the house when I should be out exploring or something." And I thought, well, yes, I get where you're coming from. And of course, when you're house sitting, that is the first and foremost responsibility. But we have seen at least one house sit recently, a few weeks ago, and they asked that minimum, it had to be a couple coming to the house sit. It couldn't be one person. And one person had to stay with their dog at all times because the dog had really severe anxiety issues. And it was only for, I think, a week and a half. But we realized we do things like grocery shopping together because we bring the groceries back in a backpack, or going out for coffees in the morning, or just exploring the town. I'm like, oh, we can't do that together. It's going to have to be like taking shifts on like who gets to go explore today. And I realize you can't even go out for dinner. So it's small things, obviously. It's like selfish things too, obviously. It's like, but I think at the end of the day, although they might be selfish, it's sort of, if it affects your experience, because Darcy and I,
or if it's something that you can't commit to, that's
exactly.
really, if that is something that, if you're a couple, I think there are a lot of couples who would have been great with this specific house sit, taking shifts on who was going to stay at the house and who wasn't, but that just wasn't something that worked for us, so we didn't apply for it.
Yeah.
I think just important to only sign up for what you can do.
Absolutely. And I think that's most of the requirements that to look out. The only other one I think that might be worth mentioning is if you're familiar with Workaway. It's a sort of you work in exchange for a place to stay. And there are some great Workaways we've heard, and there are some horror stories. You show up on a farm. It's kind of like Wolf with the work on organic farms, or worldwide work on organic farms, something. And you show up and you work and you pick vegetables or, olives or something like that. And they give you a place to stay. Usually it's a bunk bed in a dormitory. And that's an exchange rather than money. And Workaway is a little bit like that, except it's, I think it's like some of it's like you work in a cafe, you work in a bed and breakfast, you work, at a variety of other things, not just farms. And some of the house sits we've seen are a little bit like Workaway programs where they're like, under the chores, rather than saying like water my plants and walk my dog, it's I need help restructuring the irrigation system in my garden. I need help painting the bathroom. I need help laying out pavers in the so-and-so. But you get to do this in a really beautiful, like absolutely authentic 16th century farmhouse. And it's like, yes, in the middle of nowhere where I'm committing to how many hours a week of work? Because that's Workaway, I think it's 20 hours a week is the most you can work, apparently. again, many stories of people working more than that. But obviously, because house sitting isn't quite like that, it's just between you and the owner, and it's like, you don't want to get there basically and get kicked out because you're not helping them.
And that's not expected.
not
That is, I think all the websites we use are pretty clear with homeowners that your house sitter should not be doing renovations or serious, things to your house. Like there's not a leaky tap. If something breaks that is an emergency, obviously it's expected that potentially you could call a plumber or let a neighbor know so that they can, help you out. So there are sometimes emergency situations that come up. But it shouldn't be that you are doing heavy renovations on their house or landscaping or anything like that.
I think some people even actually, like, one of the things they look for is like general like handy person skills. It's sort of like if you open the door and the doorknob just comes out, like, can you put it back in and tighten the screw? Or, not quite, thankfully, like leaky faucet type stuff, but it's definitely like a little bit of a some give and take with sort of like the like basically, I don't know, I realize we haven't really done much as far as keeping things functional. It's just
we did have to fix a fridge.
Yeah, I broke the fridge door on accident, and it wasn't my fault. As the homeowners were very clear, like, it's an old fridge, it was bound to happen. You had to open like the fridge door like to the right, but then inside there's a freezer, and you had to open that to the left. So they didn't open the same direction. So you had to have the fridge all the way open to open the freezer, and I opened the fridge all the way, and it snapped this like spring. We found the part online. We explained the thing to the homeowners. I said, like, I could absolutely repair it if you want. And they're like, yeah. I mean, if you want to give it a shot, that's fine. Go for it. And it didn't actually prevent the door from opening or closing. It just prevented it from swinging close once it was open.
Mm-hmm. We've also had to, I think another house that there were workers coming to renovate something outside, and we just had to be there kind of when they were there, roughly. So that wasn't a big deal. But it's just like if you're acting as the homeowner in a very light sense. You're just someone there in case something bad happens or someone needs to come fix something.
It's kind of like if somebody breaks a window, it's just like your job to tape some cardboard up until the homeowner gets back to fix the window. It's not necessarily your job to fix the window. It's just, it's like, I think that's how we view it a lot. It's just like prevent the rain from coming in, prevent the snow from coming in, prevent bugs and wild animals from coming in, and take care of their animals. Yeah. And I think that's pretty much all as far as like just when you're getting it. I mean, I know it's all on getting your first house sit, but I think that's pretty much all. It's like really be clear on reading these requirements. Look locally once you've gotten, like, basically get that first house sit. Look locally, and once you have it and you're going online and you're using this local house sit as a review, it's like to kind of really be clear on reading other requirements, other house sits, being knowing what to expect, knowing not what to expect, kind of thing.
Yeah, just read the requirements and know what your abilities are, and be clear with yourself and with the homeowners.
Yeah, and we will see you for the next episode, which will be on, I think we're going to very briefly kind of talk about the house and what to expect in the house and things like that. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys so much for listening.